Pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Gracious Heavenly Father, creator of the universe, author of truth. Father, we're here today to do the county's business, and we ask that you be with us in our thoughts, words, and deeds. Father, we ask that you bless this county and the residents within it. And we thank you for the blessing of rain. And Father, we know you are with us each and every day. Father, we lift all of our prayers to you through your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Well, good morning, all. Not too many comments on my part. I would encourage you. Advanced voting is available at this point in time. If you care to take advantage of that, I'm sure the clerk would appreciate it. Let's work later on. So, other than that,
Fill out your census too.
Oh, the census. If you have not, please do so already. Get it done. All right. Consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, Dave speaking for those online, I would like to move that we pull out of the consent agenda the JAG award, the interlocal agreement. I see some city folks here in the audience, and so we can put that on our agenda and have a brief discussion, and I propose putting that on the first thing in the new business.
Okay. I also need to add something. We have some paperwork I need to sign for the CDBG program income report. That's needs to be on the consent agenda as well. May I have a motion for the amended consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I would so move.
Clifford,
second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion has carried. Public comment. Anybody in the room that has comment that's not on the agenda? I'm looking at our usual person of comment, and she's not commented. Okay. Dory, do we have anything from online or ahead of time?
We did have one written submission. This is from Kimberly McLean of Garden City. I just want to be clear, I do not think the commission did the right thing in going from phase 1.5 to open just because they could. I also don't approve of not enforcing the mask mandate. If you want children back in school, you might want to rethink your rash actions. Put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak. This is on you.
Okay, thank you for that public comment. If not, anything else brought in public comment, let's move into the business items. As Commissioner Jones has asked, we move that interlocal agreement and grant approval up to the top of our list. I'm going to ask the chief or Matt or one both to come up and.
Go ahead, Chief.
Mr. Chairman, while it's coming up, point of order, do we need to vote on the consent agenda? We voted to modify the consent agenda.
I thought we did we not?
well, I offered a motion, though, you didn't ask for a second for that, so.
Oh, yeah,
What?
you seconded.
I thought what Dave had asked was just to pull that from the consent agenda, and then we voted on a modified consent agenda.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, we had two different actions. One was to pull the JAG grant from the consent agenda. I offered that motion. Then you made a comment about you needed some kind of a signature for a.
Well, you guys got me on this parliamentary procedure, something terrible last couple of weeks.
But Mr. Chairman, I don't think we did it incorrectly. You do not have to have a motion to pull something from consent agenda. Anyone can request for that to happen. Then you added something to consent agenda and asked for a vote on the modified consent agenda. I think we did it properly.
That was true.
Just so Dory has something in the minutes.
There was a modified consent agenda motion.
Thank you.
Dory has a beard headlight.
Technicalities.
But I think we did it properly. I think you.
All right,
You want
now, sirs.
two city folks, got some nice chairs up here, guys.
Here.
Yeah, come on up. We may have you here a while, Mike.
That doesn't surprise me, Dave.
I mean, when we get a 105-page agenda, and 104 of those pages are from you, then that tells me we need to discuss this, right?
Have you been talking to Matt about us doing that? Because he keeps saying that we do the same thing over there. So.
I had a couple of questions, Mr. Chairman. Mike, you and I go back a long ways on police radios and so
Yes.
on, so I want to, for my clarification, perhaps for some others, years ago when I became a county employee, we worked hard to get a radio system so each agency could talk to the other.
Right.
And we finally got that achieved, and then after I departed the scene, then an 800 megahertz state system came along and still allowed interoperability, I think is a big term. I read this grant proposal, and it looks to me like it leans heavily toward radioing up the city police department, and I see nothing in there for the sheriff's office or EMS. Can you kind of fill us in on where you're headed?
Yes. Our 800 megahertz Motorola radios are the parts for the old radios that we had, the 1500, 2500 series, are becoming obsolete,
Right.
so you can't repair them. So what we have done through budgets and grants, slowly started replacing our radios through the PD and the fire department. These radios, I think we're going to get maybe three,
Four, I think.
4 radios out of it. And so what we did was we applied for a grant to try to get additional radios for our department so we can continue to get our radios replaced. We have joint SWAT teams that we use our equipment with as well.
I guess my question, rerouting the question, do we need to be working on something to secure equipment comparable to yours for the sheriff's office so you have that interoperability?
I can't speak for the sheriff. I mean, we have the interoperability, whether we replace these radios or not. We, with the 800 megahertz, we have the interoperability. So it's still there. It's still available. It's just we're trying to replace radios to get ahead of the curve so that.
That's why I want to make sure you weren't moving away from the interoperability.
No, it's same. In fact, with the new radios, we're able to add a lot more channels on these new radios than the past radios. So if we go to different events or we have different agencies coming in, or when we leave the community and have, for example, we left the community over the weekend to help out in Gray County, our joint SWAT team did. They were able to utilize these radios.
Good. Okay. Well, you've answered my question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's pretty easy, I guess. Any further questions on this issue?
Then he needs a motion,
Yes, he does.
and I would be pleased to offer that motion, Mr. Chairman, to approve they want us, the county, to co-sign, essentially. No expense out of our budget, but
You're approving the interlocal agreement.
yeah, we're approving the agreement, so that's my motion.
Clifford seconds.
Motion on the floor. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
That's a lot of paper. I believe we're ready for Pierceville Township Treasurer appointment. Dory,
Yes.
you got information on that, and other than what's in our packet here?
Well, I know that I did communicate with you a couple of weeks ago that we were having difficulty getting a hold of the Pierceville Township Treasurer. I believe that we've confirmed as much as we can that he is no longer living in that district and is no longer eligible to serve. There is a gentleman on the ballot, Mr. Alex Leitner, who will be on the ballot in August. I spoke with him last week and asked him if he would be willing to be appointed to that position now, since we have need for a treasurer. And he indicated that he would be willing to do that. He couldn't be here today, but he wanted me to pass that along to you, that he is willing. He would come in later this week to sign his oath. We've got some big deadlines coming up that require the treasurer, and we still don't have some of that was due a long time ago. So he's gonna have some things to get done. We need somebody to do that.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, this is Lon, and I would move that we appoint Alex Leitner to the office of treasurer for the Pierceville Township.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of the appointment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Unfortunately, crowd, we have an executive session next on our agenda. We actually have 2 of them back to back. how many minutes do you suppose we need, Robert, on the first one?
Let's, up to 15 minutes.
Okay, 15 minutes, just 6 of us, or who's all do we need in the room?
Me and Board of County Commissioners and myself, I believe, at this point in time.
Okay,
And, for non-elected personnel is what I
non-elected personnel,
understand.
correct.
Mr. Chairman, this is Lon. I would move that we go into executive session for the discussion of non-elected personnel with the commissioners and our administrator. And you said for up to 15 minutes.
Correct. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. 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 Motion carried. We will return no later than 5 till. All right, we are out of the first executive session. No action was taken. We have a second executive session scheduled for legal consultation, so
For how much time?
15 minutes again? Christie?
Yeah, yes,
Let's go
I would guess.
just a little fraction longer, because we can go through 15 pretty quick.
All right,
Up to 20 minutes. And, Mr. Chairman, this one, I would move that we move into executive session for consultation with legal counsel, and that we do that with our commissioners and our administrator and our county counselor for up to 20 minutes.
Second.
all those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carried. 17 after. taking. All right. Let's move on to our agenda items, the county engineer project update. John?
Should I put him on the clock too?
Yeah, put John on the clock here.
All right, no questions then. Okay, project update. Jenny Barker Road. The box is done, they're started on retention pond. Stuff, some rain probably slowed them down a little bit, or a lot of rain. We moved, or helped them move some of the vaults for the utility trench into place Thursday. And so the contractor was starting to dig trenches and for the utility for that. Then,
Are you on schedule?
well, as far as I know, I think they are.
And John, that's supposed to be a 10-month schedule, is that right?
Yeah, that's 215 working days.
Yeah.
And they're on day 18.
Okay.
Or as of the 17th, that was the 18th. Still a little bit of work around the box. Yeah, that's the work that's being done there now. I got, every week I get a little update thing, and I'll add some of that to my monthly stuff. And we meet every other week on Wednesday in the office to talk about the project too. So, and that's this week will happen. Farmland Road, we are still negotiating with property owners. I think there's been a couple that are really close to signing and settling. We still meet with 2 that we haven't talked to yet. And hopefully we'll get at least one of those this week. So moving along a little, we're starting to do some stuff there.
Are there any of these, it's situations where buildings have to be moved, or we're just simply taking?
I think we're just taking pieces of land for extra right of way.
Mhm.
Getting from 50-foot of right of way to 60 to 75 feet, depending on where we're at. Most of it is on the north, half the project on the east side because of drainage improvements. There will be a little bit bigger ditch on that east side there, where it comes down and then all the way down to the railroad tracks, and we're building a ditch along that to tie into DD1 eventually, or 2 over there. So that's where most of it's coming from, and some temporary easements is what we're working on also. Our asphalt project, county asphalt project this year, Venture Corporation, they are scheduled to start that week of the 3rd or 4th of August. Mill and overlay, Finney Scott line, and pave a couple streets there in front. So that starts next week. Like $1.8 million, half BRP, half special highway, 20,000 tons of asphalt.
Will they haul the millings to you?
Yes. And they'll be hauling the asphalt out of Lake Spillmore. They're doing this week they're supposed to start linking Highway 25, 25 south to Kearney County line, and then they'll come up and do us when they're done. Farmland, US 83 Craft Road was open last week, I think Friday, or the week before on Friday, and TB Road is now closed, and it'll be closed to the end of that project on the west side of the highway. And I imagine once they're done with our project, they'll move their plant down there, maybe getting ready to start with paving 83 there.
Let me touch on that quick. You say the craft is open both sides?
Yes.
Because harvest to be here in 6 weeks or so.
Well, it's just in time then. Well, they might wait and close it again, but no. Usually what happens,
John, just an observation on the 83 thing. Some of the new construction created a dam, and they had water cut across the highway, and had to have patrol out there the other morning down to one lane before they could dig a ditch and get the water off the highway. So they had miscalculated just a little bit after they got their 3-inch plus rain down there.
Think anybody expected that much rain? I wouldn't have, I haven't, but, so, those are those projects. I've had a request for a lateral or someone to tie into Sewer District 2. And this would be on Grandview East, but to tie on where the temples are, 2 houses down. There's behind the temple, they tied in with the force main, brand pump and a force main. I think we can get this guy on, and I need to work with Kristen a little bit on stuff about the petition and memo and the easement, but I think we can help him and get him on. And so we'll be working on that this next week or so. I've had some discussion with DD1 and Anderson Road in the box there at Anderson crosses DD1. Narrow, where the edge of pavement is the edge of pavement. So, I've got a couple bridges that I'm tossing around what we need to do with. This is not really a bridge, it's probably a 7x4 box or 7x6 box that I need to look at on how we want to do that. But I have this one, and there's a bridge up on Bigelow Road that has weight restrictions on it, and a highway patrolman living a block or 2 away and giving tickets to farm grain trucks going over it. So I might have some bridges that need to be pushed up in the line to get replaced. But I think on the Anderson, I'm looking at precast. DD1 offered up $10,000 to go towards the new box on there. So it might take advantage of that and try to push that along a little quicker.
We could take care of that one ourselves, can we not, or is that?
If we do a precast, we could probably do that ourselves, yes. And so I need to look at prices for that. It may cause a lot of disruption in traffic when we close the road, but that's the only way we're gonna do that. That is all I have. I need to talk to you maybe afterwards about what we talked about Friday.
Okay.
Any questions about anything for me?
Gentlemen?
Just, I saw the state announcements about funding projects we were overlooked for Farmway Road.
Yes, I'm sorry. We did not make that cut at all. I don't know how close we were, but, yeah.
There wasn't much in western Kansas when I looked at that map.
No,
There's maybe 2 projects in southwest Kansas that were bridges and an overlay, I think.
And Spore's doing the drainage as well as Jenny Barker Road, or it's separate?
Ford is a prime contractor on that project, so they will be doing the dirt work out. The ditch is the retention pond and on Jenny Barker.
Thank you.
Further questions for John?
Thank you, John.
Thank you, sir.
9 minutes, not bad.
Yeah, did you hear that, John? 9 minutes.
You didn't even have to take a break.
All right, Colleen, your turn, please. Health Department COVID-19 updates. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you all doing? Good.
great.
So I was just going to kind of talk about our case numbers and what we're currently seeing over at the health department testing-wise, our testing rates. So we're starting to finally see a little bit of an increase in COVID testing in Finney County, as well as an increase in some positive cases. So we returned to the health department on June 22nd, where we are currently utilizing a drive-up method on the south side of our building. This allows for our patients to remain in their vehicles to receive testing. It also limits exposure for our staff within the health department and other patients within the health department. The first week back at the health department, we tested 64 people, with 12 coming back positive. That gives us a positivity rate of 19%. The week of the 29th, which was also the holiday week, we had a 4-day testing on that week because we were closed on Friday. We tested 61 people, 12 were positive, and gave us a positivity rate of 20%. The week of the 6th, we tested 81, 20 were positive, with a 22% positivity rate. Last week, the July 13th through the 17th, we tested 136, 25 came back positive, giving us an 18% positivity rate. As you heard, we have more than doubled our testing numbers since returning to the health department in a month. So that first week we did 64, and now we've tested 136 last week. So more than doubled in a month. I expect that these testing rates will continue to increase as we continue seeing an increase in cases and positivity in Finney County. Our average current number is about 20 people a day that we test. So I was looking at today's schedule and we already have about 30 scheduled today that we're testing. So it is starting to creep up. And then also I was gonna ask Sarah, or if Sarah can pull up a website so that I can also show you the trends across the state. If you can go to covid.ks.gov, Sarah, and I can kind of walk you guys through. I'm sure you are aware of it. Sure.
While they're pulling it up, Ms. Jim, so help me understand again though.
Absolutely.
The people who are being tested, because I'm asked this question not every day, but several times a week.
Sure.
They're still being screened before they're allowed to be tested, or is anybody who just wants to be tested, period, being tested?
So at the health department with KDHE, our criteria is at least one symptom of COVID, and we can test them. So they are supposed to call the COVID hotline, still 272-3600, call the health department, we'll talk to them about any possible exposure to a positive, what any symptoms they have, and then schedule from there. It's a lot of questions, of course, and we're also seeing an uptick in seasonal allergies, which may also increase our testing numbers too. Okay, so on covid.ks.gov, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see the Kansas COVID data over on the right. So in here, if you scroll down a little bit, it'll show you the state of Kansas, and it'll show you actually the data per county. And so I just wanted to show this to you guys, make sure that you all know it. If you scroll down a little bit, so it shows the testing rates and everything. If you click on Finney County, Sarah.
Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
And then scroll down, there will be two maps on there. So as you can see, our case positivity rate not by onset date falls in agreement with kind of our highest numbers in mid-May. And then you can see that we've obviously decreased. We returned back to the health department, and then we have a couple of days of those increased positives. If you hover over those bars, it'll also show you the numbers of positives that are coming in. If you go over to the right to look at our current ones, we're starting to see those increases. And then if you scroll down a little bit more too, it'll show the trend lines as well within Finney County. So you can see that we've leveled out there for a little while, but you can see just a little bit of a gradual increase again. The very interesting thing, and I'll definitely encourage you guys to look at that map, covid.ks.gov. If you look at this map of Kansas, I'm sure you guys have already. If you go over to, and Sarah, can you go back up to the state of Kansas map? Can you click on, say, Wyandotte County? Up one? Yep, there you go. And then scroll down. You can kind of see that they're seeing all their increases now. They're getting over 100 positives a day. So you can just kind of see that trend line. They had that same or a similar increase, slight increase in April and May. We were a couple weeks behind them, and so you can see that they're increasing now, and we're likely to start increasing again here.
Just a question, Colleen.
Sure.
Will these increases correspond back to the 4th of July celebration when people were?
Sure. I mean, at this point,
Yeah.
you can see anything within the last 2 weeks, so we're seeing those increases in positives now because of, potential exposures the last couple of weeks. So we're always about 2 weeks behind. So we were surprised that we didn't see those increases after Mother's Day and some graduations and that type of thing, but we are definitely starting to see a little bit of an uptick now.
Colleen,
Yes, sir.
you're doing our testing at the health department. What is your capacity? How many a day do you think you can do before you're in trouble?
So that is the magical question, of course. Right now we have our courier set up. So our courier picks up usually between 11:45 and noon. And so the courier transports the specimens to Topeka. So that limits the kind of amount that we can do during the days. We have talked significantly about what our numbers look like there. There are some modifications that we can do, which is moving our rapid testing to the afternoons and just do our standard send out in the morning, which would free up even more time. We've looked at our general, during this time of the year, we typically can see anywhere between 80 and 120 people in our normal capacity. So that traffic flow is normal for that area this time of the year. I think we're still finger on the pulse, making sure that we're doing okay. We're still only using about 5 of our stalls. We have another 6 or 7 stalls that we can open up and pull more staff to. So we can expand there. A lot of it's going to be dependent upon courier and what that transport to Topeka will look like. Previously, when we talked to our courier about expanding testing and picking up in Finney County at the end of the day, it was like a $500 price tag. And so we're looking at revamping some of that or finding a creative way of doing a courier to Topeka.
But that's a cost that can be picked up by the
grant funding, yes.
Okay.
Do you have more presentation, or can I open it up for questions?
Absolutely open it up to questions.
Dave?
Mr. Chairman, this is Dave speaking. Dr. Lee Norman
Sure.
on TV a week ago or so was talking about this rapid rise. Wyandotte County was mentioned where they had, I think, something like a week's time, 900 positives. That sound right? But he was attributing that to 2 things: to the bar scene, the nightclub scene, and funerals. I don't know that we have a bar here that would hold that many, and I don't see a whole lot of funerals that are real big. Are you attributing any activity here in Finney County to something that, like Dr. Norman was for Wyandotte County?
So I will say that we have not currently traced any of our outbreaks, even though they haven't been deemed outbreaks, but any of the current positives back to a bar scenario. We are tracing them back to more so workplace or personal social events. Again, when the state has kind of looked at exposures, they've identified places where it's difficult to maintain social distancing or possible sharing of food or drinks and that kind of thing. So bars have been kind of determined a hotspot, as well as trying to think of what the other highest.
Well, we're talking about church events, and funerals was one of the.
Maybe linked to there specifically. I know bars, restaurants, and like gyms, they've specifically found potentially to be higher risk social areas, but there's several.
I just find it interesting that we keep going up and almost at concerning rates at times. And what do you attribute that to? Because we now have mask requirements in Home Depot, in Walmart, in Sam's Club, about all of the big box stores
Sure.
are now requiring masks. So They must be transmitting this virus somewhere other than in the store. It's interesting in trying to put your finger on where's that happening. So.
That's why that contact tracing is so important. So, Robert talked about our grant funding. We would like to pick up a few more staff members to help with contact tracing, disease investigations, testing, those types of things, and use that grant funding to help support that initiative. So those are things that we're working on.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Further questions? Lon?
Colleen, and this is Lon for those online, two things, either questions, comments, I'm not quite sure how they're gonna be phrased. One is, I haven't seen the demographics recently. I was following that early on for 2-3 months, and how many in their 80s and how many in their teens and how many in their 30s. But I've been told that many of these who are being tested or who are testing positive today, and I don't want to be quoted on this, even though I know we're being taped right now, but are in the 30 to 50 age range or something. They're not necessarily the youngest, not necessarily the oldest. Are you finding, or what are you finding as the age range for these test results that are positive that you just referenced to us?
So our data has always been pretty consistent with seeing the highest number between 20 to 34 age group. We've seen that consistency. Our hospitalization numbers are completely different demographic, of course. Still, it's stayed pretty consistent within our highest numbers there. We have seen some children, but typically that younger working force is where we're finding the positives currently.
And as I've said to this group and to you in the past, the two things that I focus on more than the positives are hospitalizations and deaths. It seems, if I'm not mistaken, our deaths have stayed steady for quite some time at 10 for our county.
Yep.
And it seems as if here in recent weeks that our hospitalizations have hovered around 5 plus or minus just a little bit. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Colleen, you made a comment that you do 2 different types of testing.
Sure.
Rapid test and then whatever the name for the other one, but what is the accuracy of the 2 different tests?
So our send out Cahill lab, so it goes to KPHE's lab in Topeka, 96 to 100%. Our rapids reported by KPHE are around the 70 to 80% range. That is why it's so important for us to ensure the sensitivity of the tests are matching the onset of symptoms. And so our standard send out, we usually test at 24 hours of onset of symptoms to ensure an accurate result. On our rapids, we like to see about 48 hours. So depending on the onset of symptoms and the individual's severity of symptoms, that's how we kind of design that testing, as well as our rapid tests have very specific purposes. They are given to us from the state for very specific purposes, so we have to fall within that compliance.
So, I guess I'm not following you quite.
Sure.
How do you qualify for which test? I guess.
So more often than not, general public will be our standard send out lab, which has a 96 to 100% accuracy rate.
And that's what, a 4-day wait or?
So with the increases that you're seeing across the state, last week we've been seeing about a 4 to 5 day.
Okay.
We were seeing within usually about 48 hours, we were seeing results. Last week, I think that the lab fell a little bit behind, so we saw a little bit longer of a test result there. Rapids, it will be our Tyson employees, of course, high risk, and law enforcement.
I would agree with Commissioner Kishnius, Dr. Clifford, that we've done very well since we voted to reopen in early June. And at that time, I said we weren't voting virus out of the county. So I think it's a time to reemphasize to citizens that this will be with us for the foreseeable future, given the lag in getting good treatments and or vaccine. So I would encourage citizens to still maintain social distancing and hygiene, but also mask wear when they can't protect themselves. So I think people are taking individual responsibility. I think that's more important than government edict, and appears to be working. But I appreciate your work and keep us informed.
Colleen, I'm going to ask you to help spread the word on this a little bit. I get several calls for folks that want to go to need to have a test before they can go to a doctor. And there's a procedure, some of those you refer off instead of the health department. Would you kind of cover that contact
Absolutely.
for those people who think they need a test for a doctor or are required to have a test where they can get tested?
So for pre-op testing, we are recommending Genesis. So Genesis is doing all of the pre-op testing. So before going to your doctor, call Genesis to schedule there for that type of testing. Health department, we are strictly symptomatic because we fall under KDHE's rules with that. So Genesis is doing the pre-op testing.
I appreciate that. I think we all as commissioners have had visits about
Questions?
that.
Yeah, sure.
Well, just a follow-up question, because I was out doing some district visits last week, and there's a lady in our district who, gosh, I can't remember which town she was in, I've been to so many. But she was having trouble finding somebody to do the pre-op testing.
Sure.
So would Genesis, would they allow out-of-county people, or are they limited to their scope of geographic?
I'm not aware of them limiting out of county. They do have several offices in other counties too, so I don't know obviously what.
Well, that's, I'm gonna research.
But that may be
one.
an option. So far from what I've seen, they've been pretty flexible with
Okay.
testing.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, further questions, gentlemen? Thank you very much.
Thank
Keep
you.
up the good work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We have a presentation at 10 o'clock, and I'd like to take a recess for 10 minutes before. That gives us about 10 minutes for some discussion on board governance, or let Robert move into his presentation for 10 minutes. So, is that fair enough? Anything on board governance, gentlemen?
Mine, Mr. Chairman, is just simply that we had a KAC board meeting by Zoom. And it looks like we're gonna have another one by Zoom in August. But the KAC conference that was scheduled for October has been canceled for live. However, they're looking at doing some online opportunities or options. We don't know what that's gonna look like yet. But I wanted you to be aware of that. And then secondly, we are requesting any legislative issues to be submitted, and we are having our first legislative policy committee meeting on the 14th of August. So if there's issues that we think are important to this region or Finney County, we need to get those submitted for consideration before the 14th of August.
What was the outcome of their survey they ran on counties that opted in or opted out? I know they
Right,
said,
they did a survey on that, but I don't think they gave us those results.
I haven't seen anything on their website, so I was curious if you knew.
No, the only survey they reported to us, so they did a survey for the conference, and it was 80% that wanted to have a live conference. The problem has been in the city of Wichita and with the venues and so forth more than anything else. But I don't remember them mentioning what the results of that survey were that you
We'll
referenced.
find out if you shoot me
Yeah,
an email.
well, yeah, we need to get that out. I'll do some checking on that.
Anything further? You mind a few minutes, or do you want to, we can do the commission reports, that won't take very long.
Could we,
Okay, we can do that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
may we take a minute and ask, so I can ask Dory a question?
well, think about it. Okay, no, go ahead.
Have you found out anything about the after the election,
Yes.
reviewing the ballots?
Yes, so I was gonna give you an update during Robert's report,
Oh,
but I
okay.
can go ahead and do that.
Well, I was just curious, because I got somebody that wants to volunteer if we're not eligible.
Canvassing.
Yeah, canvassing.
So according to the Secretary of State's office, there is no statute that says you have to recuse yourself from certifying those election results. So there is no statute. It would be up to your personal preference. I would remind you that you guys have probably certified your results of your commission races for years. I certified my own election. at times, so it's not something that's covered in law, so that would be a personal choice if you think it's important. You're not actually counting ballots or
Right.
or
I agree.
anything like that, just reviewing what other people have done. So that is up to you. If you do choose to recuse yourself, you would need to, it would be up to the remaining members of the board to appoint somebody. If more than 2 vacancies exist, you would need to include the county election officer in that appointment process.
All right, thank you, Dory.
You're welcome.
Let's just move to commission reports. Robert's, hopefully it's a little more in depth than ours is gonna be, so we got about 5 minutes, Larry.
I have nothing to report.
Bill?
Just in a lot of counties in the first district campaigning, many interesting issues, but nothing specific to report.
And same with me in the last week, nothing particular, I do not believe. We had some meetings coming up here this week, but not fast, so. Dave?
Real quick, Mr. Chairman, I attended the Garden City Commission meeting a couple weeks ago, and that was somewhat interesting. I thought maybe that the face mask issue might come up there. It did not. So they apparently are willing to follow what the county commission decided on face mask policy for the county. The Finney County Committee on Aging meeting I attended, and I only want to make one report. Sherry Campbell, who, as you recall, had a brain aneurysm, was able to make an appearance, and she's doing well. She has a niece helping her with mobility issues and so on. Then attended the Planning Commission, and some of those folks will be over, I expect, about our next meeting with a whole host of rezone and so on. About 2/3 of what we know as Rolling Hills is being changed, and so that's coming. Have library board meeting tonight. If anybody is interested in attending that, I have some specific instructions about how you can enter the meeting, because the front door locks at 4 o'clock. And so we can get you in through the back door. Finally, one last thing. I had a phone call from Scott from Russell Child Development wanting to know who the contact person was for the CARES funding. And so I gave him Robert's name and so on, and he's making contact. But it just illustrates we've got folks that we never thought of are going to show up on our doorstep and want reimbursement, or that's the wrong term, but funding out of this federal program. It goes far beyond local government. It's obvious by now that there are all kinds of folks out there. So I think we're going to discuss that in about 5 minutes here. So that's my report.
Well, mine is just basically the most involvement I had with outside meetings was the KAC board. But the only other thing from that board meeting is the spark money that's been released is supposed to be direct deposited, and Robert's been checking the bank account. But I did see something this morning that it might be in the bank account today. But it was released last Wednesday or Thursday by ACH into the county's bank accounts, and all 105 counties did have their application or whatever that word is in by the deadline. So all 105 counties will receive their portion of that money.
The only thing I forgot to mention, this is Fair Week. You won't know it because it's all strictly 4-Hers and open class, but this is Fair Week, and a lot of individuals are being involved with that. So let's take a recess for 10 minutes before we have a program on the Stark Grant Consultant.
Correct.
And they will have a presentation for us.
That's correct.
Online. Okay. Recess for 10 minutes. Let you take over.
Very good. Jeff, can you hear us all right, and Alex?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, very good. Well, good morning. I want to thank you for joining us again. Once again, commissioners, we talked about outsourcing the process for your Spark grant management, and we looked locally at some individuals and firms that might be able to take on some of the tasks of doing it, and because of some other constraints that those individuals and firms had, that we went this route in terms of looking for somebody who has some experience in managing this style of grant. So Jeff Stevens is joining us today to talk a little bit about his firm and the process, and I'll just let him begin if that's okay, Jeff.
That's great. So good morning, everybody. Really appreciate the opportunity to come and present to you before. Appreciate the virtual aspect of this as we're dealing with this pandemic. Just to, we'll start with a little bit of introduction on both our firms, iParametrics and our partner, Metric Consulting. Then we'll go through kind of an overview of some of the programs, how we might be able to help Finney County, talk about some of the ideas that we have that are potential opportunities. Even just what you mentioned about Rushville Child Development Center, that supporting nonprofits could be a big element under this CRF grant. And we'll look at items through there, answer your questions, and hopefully look forward to working for you, in the future. So just a little bit about iParametrics. We were founded in 2003. We've worked all throughout the country helping communities recover after disasters. Our team really has a good, strong customer orientation, and we see that in our Dun & Bradstreet score. We're rated a 94 on independent authorization. We've helped hundreds of clients throughout the country, worked in all 50 states and even internationally. Just a little bit about myself. I'm the Vice President of Emergency Management here at iParametrics. I'm actually the former pandemic flu coordinator for the state of Rhode Island. So dealing with pandemics is something that I've done throughout my career. I've managed some of the largest disasters around the country, especially the largest one in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I've worked all over the country, and really with all of that national experience, though, we're really a personally driven organization. So we want to be, help communities. And I'm working from home just about like everybody else. And that's my 2-year-old calling me if you can hear that in the background. So she doesn't realize when presentations are going on. So I apologize for that. I'm going to let Alex introduce herself and Metric Consulting.
Hi, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. I'm Alexandria Harvey, and I'm the Disaster Recovery Program Manager at Metric Consulting. So Metric's disaster recovery story began in August 1992, where Metric, like so many in South Florida, were heavily impacted from Hurricane Andrew. And since then, we've grown our services. So we're a comprehensive emergency management and disaster recovery services firm. And we offer services from emergency management, debris removal. We have a strong expertise and have done a lot of projects all over the country with FEMA public assistance, CDBG-DR funding, housing disaster recovery, economic development. And this is also not our first time to respond to an infectious disease outbreak. We actually responded to the avian flu crisis in Iowa. So that's just a little bit about us, but also that, so as I said, I'm the Disaster Recovery Program Manager. I actually recently moved back to the States from Puerto Rico, where I was helping run 2 big disaster recovery programs in Puerto Rico. I also I have a background in local government. I've worked, actually the Midwest is where my family's from. So this is a unique opportunity for me to work with you guys. I've helped Iowa policymakers in the past. I've also gotten to serve on city council and help with economic development projects.
So really when we think about approaching, a county like Finney and supporting you all, we really want to start with understanding your community, your goals and your values. We like to view ourselves as an extension of you with your goals and commitments as our North Star. We really try to take a holistic approach to disaster recovery. Not only are we going to think about the Spark funding, but also how can we leverage that with FEMA public assistance, community development block grants, even the, HHS's, the Center for Disease Control, their grants. Because ultimately we can weave all of these grants together to drive the most effective outcomes. And there are certain things that may be reimbursable under FEMA public assistance. And if you can get them reimbursed under that avenue, you then don't have to spend those the Spark dollars there, and really allow the dollars to go further. Ultimately, what we want to do is address some short-term gaps and make a profound and lasting community impact. We want to be transformative with the Spark dollars to the greatest extent that we can. And we want to support the county, local government, nonprofits, as we just mentioned, businesses, and really residents. We're going to do a mix of remote and in-person support, and we'll talk a little bit about what that is on the next slide, next couple of slides. First, I wanted to talk about FEMA public assistance. Because as I mentioned, there are things that are going to be eligible that you've incurred already, expenses that the county has, that really you can use this funding program for. So FEMA PA is the county's eligible. So are the local municipalities and many of the nonprofits that are in the area. The incident period, even though the major disaster declarations were in mid-March, the incident period is actually retroactive to January 20th, and it's still ongoing. We don't know when they potentially will be reimbursed or not. And there's really no deadline on the funding yet. So you don't have to, if we mentioned you haven't necessarily put in your request for public assistance yet, but that's no problem. There's no deadline yet. The FEMA PA program is a 75-25% matching grant. So if we can move some county costs off onto that 75%, then the county is only responsible for 25% of those responsibilities. And oftentimes that can be offset with donation. So I'm sure the counties receive donations of, of personal protective equipment, meals, volunteers, those types of things. They can all be used to offset that 25%. And then anything that remains, we can move on to the Spark funding as well to really try and reduce the overall impact. And things that are eligible for FEMA public assistance included, a lot of the cleaning and sanitation expenses, personal protective equipment, overtime of county staff, or if, I know I would join the Facebook Live a couple minutes before we started, and I think it was the health director was on talking about, some of the contact tracing needs where they may need extra staff. Some of that unbudgeted staff that is necessary for the response can actually be covered under FEMA public assistance. The important thing that I would caution you is that there's a lot of rumors that are going on about FEMA public assistance. I've had, we have some university clients and they've said, oh, well, we weren't eligible for FEMA public assistance. And I said, no, actually you are. Here it is in the policy manual, black and white. So we really want to, know about that. And then one of the great things about the FEMA public assistance program is they actually offer 5% of your total disaster cost to pay for the administrative processes. So we can actually use our, use some of those funds to help offset our costs. And FEMA, just kind of this graphic below, just for your awareness, is how the FEMA public assistance simplified application process works. Basically, because of the scale of the COVID disaster, this is the first time ever that the U.S. has had every single state and territory declared at the same time. So it's a massive crush of people that are applying for public assistance. So they took their standard 15-step process and boiled it down to 7 steps, and those are below. So, we wanted to give you that background because we want to try and put as much eligible dollars on this grant as possible, because then when we approach Sparks, we can make those dollars go further. So the interesting and challenging thing about Spark is that it's a good amount of funding, you know, over $10 million for the county, but you really have to act fast. So if you choose to engage us, we would start with a community needs assessment, and just realizing that time is of the essence. We've already gone ahead and pre-prepped some of the surveys that we can do. We push them out through SurveyMonkey and paper surveys, and we're supporting some other Kansas counties, and are really seeing some strong feedback about, you know, helping us design programs, and also not only engaging folks, but realizing where the gaps are, so that when we go on site in the coming week, you know, next week, we can really understand who we need to target and make sure that we use that time effectively. We do both the community needs assessment and the business impact survey. That business impact survey too is inclusive of the nonprofit community. So, you know, just kind of providing that out. And those two assessments will give us the foundation to figure out how we want to spend the dollars that are allocated. We do some, you know, follow up with some in-person reviews next week at the end of the week, and really get you a spending plan draft by August 7th. We've got to move very aggressively because, you know, Kansas has the 15th as the August 15th as the deadline, and we really want to be a couple days in advance of that. So we probably seek to have a special county commission meeting probably on the 13th to approve the plan. And we would provide continued and ongoing support through the end of 2020 and really beyond if necessary. I know that, you know, Congress is back in session today, and they're talking about additional stimulus funds and what that could look like. When we think about your spending plan, what we also want to do is identify funds in excess of your allocation, because at a certain point, late October, November, the state of Kansas has to spend this money by the end of the year. You know, there's no indication yet that Treasury is going to grant an extension. But you know, when it comes to the allocations, if you have a solid spending plan and say, hey, you know what, we've prioritized this $10 million, but really we had $15 million. So if another 5 becomes available, contact Finney County because we'll spend it right away. And we really want to try and do that to show that we're set and we're leaning forward. And really, you know, Kansas recommends a mix of reimbursement and direct aid. You know, so there may be, you know, as was mentioned with Russell Child Development Center and many of the local municipalities, there may be some reimbursement, you know, that needs to be done, and there may be some direct aid opportunities, and really look at other opportunities. The other thing too is we don't want to just look at the grant programs that are existing now, but also look forward to FEMA hazard mitigation and the BRIC program, the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. It'll be the first time that grant program is available. We'll look at community development block grants, their mitigation portion, their disaster recovery portion, which is the acronyms that are there, and really extend. And this Venn diagram is really how Kansas views everything. You know, they want to look at today's needs and tomorrow's opportunities and make some investments in Sparks. You know, and that really kind of leads us to our next item is what we want to help you do is address short-term gaps, but think about those items that can be really big and transformative. You know, there's programs that we can help you set up that will support residents and businesses, you know, and address really the short-term needs, you know, the mortgage and rental and utility relief programs. You know, food distribution, nutrition services, those are key things. You know, we can do some small business micro grants, some workforce development programs. You know, in talking with Robert and the staff last week, one of the big things that came up is the need for childcare. You know, so there's some opportunities to potentially do a mixture of a program where you could do a county-run childcare program, but then also link with some, you know, post-secondary educational opportunities and some workforce development for childcare development, and maybe foster some ability to do some private investment as well. You know, one of the other big items, and really your staff should be commended for this, is 3 years ago they did a broadband study, and then they have a solid plan. You know, you can improve your broadband access within the county, and it does a number of things. One, it will help with economic development. It will help with remote and distance learning, and really help with telehealth, you know, by setting up that backbone and that capability. You can look at some mobile testing capabilities to improve the fairgrounds, and the infrastructure there to support large care capacity. That has benefit not only to the short term, COVID issues, but also could potentially be long term from an economic development opportunity and a future disaster resilience. To be able to have that open space, and if it has the infrastructure necessary, if you have to do kind of a point of dispensing or something like that after a tornado goes through or another severe storm, it could really be good there. And I mentioned the child care programs, and just kind of the honeycomb to the right-hand side on the slide is just some of the investment categories that Spark is really looking to make the investments as well. Not only just focused on the county, but Alex, why don't you talk about some of the program examples from around the U.S. as well?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's been a lot of great examples and case studies from other programs in the U.S. that have been implemented at the state level, but also at the county level. And here I have the themes in Kansas, and here's just some examples for each one. So here in New Orleans, we've actually partnered with FEMA funds to implement a meals program. So we're using, we have contracts with local restaurants who are helping deliver meals to families in need. So it's a way to not only boost the local economy, but it's also, we've been able to stretch our CARES funding dollars with matching it with FEMA funds. Another example is in Minnesota, the health department is working with nonprofit healthcare providers and also private providers to help them provide, to meet their needs, for instance, for expanding telemedicine, improving capacity to respond. So those are some examples. In education, in Richmond, Virginia, they're providing response grants to local nonprofits to help service needs like after school and different needs of the school district. In Wisconsin, with connectivity, they've provided grants to try to expand broadband access in areas where it's more limited. Some economic development programs. We've seen a lot of programs a lot of counties running rental assistance programs to help people who've lost their job or may have been impacted by COVID. We've also seen mortgage relief programs to help people to avoid foreclosures and stay in their homes. Another great program is in Chicago. They've done a utility relief program. And this has been really helpful for people who, are experiencing increased expenses and having to make decisions between, putting food on the table or paying, keeping the electricity on. So these are just some examples that we've seen that we could easily implement. And also, I don't know if you guys have any CDBG funding, but there's a way to also match CARES funding with that and implement programs, typical assistance programs through that funding. So here's just some examples. And of course, depending on, once we do a needs assessment, we can really make programs to address the needs of your county.
And really that's what, at the core of it, we're able to do. We do some ideation, we do some grant creation, making sure that you're taking advantage of every opportunity, and then really also managing the whole process through. We're leveraging proven grant management processes. We're going to use a program called Smart Sheets to handle a lot of the reimbursement requests. Make sure that all of the tracking and reporting are done, that we track our deadlines, any of the things that we need to do, and also really ensure transparency. To make sure that there's good stewardship of the dollars that are coming into the county, to make sure that it provides the best benefit to the citizens and the taxpayers. We'll handle all the reporting for you. I continue to identify funding opportunities. And really, as I said at the top, we want to act as an extension of the county. We want to continue to earn your trust as we work throughout this process. And we want to make sure that at the end of the day, when everything, when COVID's over, you say, I was really glad I brought those guys in because they were able to help us do really big things for the county. So with that, I wanted to open up to your questions, comments, or any concerns that you may have.
All right, gentlemen, any questions from the commission before I open it up to the audience?
Jeff, I have a question. After this is all over, I'm sure there will be FEMA audits. Will you be around to help us through the audit process?
Absolutely. So one of the things is right now what we're considering is an emergency contract because of the waiver of the local match, the waiver of the emergency and exigency circumstances, and you want to have a long-term contract for this as well, but you have to bid it out, ensure fair and open competition and everything else. But we will absolutely be around for you to support.
Have you, I'm sure you've probably gone through FEMA audits before. Have you ever had any problems?
No, sir. We deal with FEMA audits on a regular basis. We actually, part of our company, for the last 15 years, we actually are FEMA in the field. We augment FEMA staff east of the Mississippi. So in FEMA regions 1, 3, and 4. So we are regularly working. We understand their programs. Actually, my team built a training program for 1,500 of the contingent staff that FEMA uses that is an online training program for the program delivery manager position. So we know FEMA policy in and out. And actually, that's where on the front end, we are doing a lot of things to make sure that we're protective of the county's money and may say, hey, no, you don't want to put that under FEMA because that's going to be an audit finding and you don't want to deal with that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Jeff, I have a question that's more generic. You made continual reference about county funds. However, we're learning that there are a lot more entities than the county involved. Last week we had our district court people here saying, you know, our reimbursement through Sparks is, we're told, to come through the county. This week I had a call from an agency that deals with children with some disabilities, and they want to turn in their claim for funding. So how do we funnel all of those claims through the process, through the system, and get them to you?
Yeah, so what we're going to end up doing is creating, using that smart sheet process. Before we, if you think about the order of things, how it's going to happen is first it's going to, you all have to decide as a county commission responsible for these dollars, what you want to reimburse for and what you don't. Because there may be some elements that, you had mentioned Russell Child Development Center, as that nonprofit. They may be eligible for FEMA funds. So you may want to tell them, hey, go first for FEMA, and here's the items that you want to consider there. Then they may come back and come to you and say, do the 25% match of that. So you all have to set the priorities. It's not just that, hey, this is an open pot of money for everybody. So you'll have to figure out from a Sparks investment standpoint, how you want to meter that out. But you're absolutely right. The county is receiving the funds, and it's on behalf of the nonprofits in the area. It's on behalf of the local government. And you want to figure out how to make everybody as whole as possible. And then you also want to do those transformative investments that will help everybody as they go along. So, we want to hear what the community, the nonprofits are seeking reimbursement for. We want to make that grant justification, which grant should it go to. Then you all as commissioners will need to make the value judgment of what do you want to reimburse for, or what do you want to ask the local organizations to fund on their own. And then how does that prioritize within the rest of the remaining funds? Does that make sense?
It does, but a lot of those rules about what is reimbursable, I understand, are being set by our governor's office and in collision with cooperation, probably the better term, with the Kansas Association of Counties. So I don't know who all is involved in that process, but what information I have, they're determining what's eligible for reimbursement and what's not.
Well, on the FEMA public assistance side, that's where I'm talking about a little bit of the eligibility. And it still is a local county decision on what you choose to reimburse as well and how you spend those dollars. So, we want to mix and match the grants. And one of the things too that would probably be very useful in the beginning if you select us to come in is we'd have a session with the local governments and with the nonprofits when we'd be on site next week to talk about, you know, the different grant programs that are out there and how it's not necessarily go right after CARES dollars. You may want to go after FEMA dollars first because that's the more appropriate pot of funding for the reimbursement that they're requesting.
Okay, I understand. They're actually talking two different pools of money and and an order in which to seek that money. So I appreciate your response. Thank you.
We have some representatives from the city. I'll offer your chance for questions if you have something that the commission has not brought forward. If you, as city representatives, have any questions, I'll offer that opportunity to you as well. Please.
My name's Melinda Getz. I'm the finance director for the city of Garden City. When we were speaking earlier about the community development funds that were available, I know all of us have worked through the process with some CDBG loans. I didn't know if, since those were already approved to be paid out, if we could maybe do some loan forgiveness for those businesses that did qualify for that CDBG money. That was one of my questions. Another one of my questions is when you speak of internet, getting a better internet service here in Finney County, I know the county and the city have been working on a fiber project. The city was going to take the south route and the county was going to take the north route. That might be something that you might want to consider in your discussions.
I think we'll probably discuss that a little bit further on, but Robert, is there any questions that we have not asked Jeff that we should? So get the information out there.
You know, there's two parts of this funding for that the county received. One is the reimbursement aspect of it, as Jeff spoke about, and the other is for the future spending, direct spending or future spending. The reimbursement aspect of it is that, in essence, the county is required to reimburse, if you will, some of the local units of government here, cities, school districts, college, and so forth, on those direct expenses that they've incurred since March 1 through July 31st. And that's your first reporting date, then 15 days later is August 15th. And as Jeff pointed out, is that your spending plan then needs to be formalized by that August 15th date. So I guess in response to Commissioner Jones's comment about individuals that are requesting funding based upon some of the Zoom meetings that county staff has been involved in, is that they have indicated that those types of funding requests are more appropriately done and incorporated into your spending plan. And once again, as Jeff pointed out, you, the Board of County Commissioners of the county, makes that determination in terms of funding level for those types of things. And I know that Commissioner Dreesen, you were involved in the meetings on Friday. You might share with them some of the things that you noted during those meetings.
Basically, guys, I was thinking small. I was thinking recovery of actual expenses, but there's quite a bit of our allocation that's not involved with the actual recovery of expenses. And staff has put forth an IT proposition, and it's brought that out as well about how we can really do a lot of good for the whole community, school, college, the Finney County as a whole. And it's a very ambitious fiber optic project that we might touch on here a little bit, and probably just as well, correct, Robert?
That's correct. One of the things that as we began the process with those staff members that, in essence, considered frontline as we reacted to the COVID virus response, such as health department, e-management, IT. So we went back and looked at what challenges we had, and one of the underlying things that we continue to see, other than the need for PPE and things of that nature, was the communications aspect of it, and the IT issues that we just weren't ready for that magnitude of a situation. That's when, at least I learned that lo and behold, the county had been working on a plan for a while, and it was on the shelf because of some funding challenges. And I think, as was pointed out, this may be an opportunity, if it meets all the requirements of this funding, that we may be able to push. And in essence, as we get further into this, we can flesh that out a little bit more in terms of what that looks like, keeping in mind that the biggest constraint at this point in time seems to be the timing aspect of it, being able to, first off, if that would happen to comply with the grant requirements for the SPARK grant, is getting the money spent by 12/31 of this year. And so county staff is working on those options and potentially figuring out if this is something that we could actually make happen. And it not only has the benefit of the ability for the county to respond to the future, but additionally, then it has that connectivity for all potential users of that fiber and economic development impact as well for Fayette County. So with that, we can turn it back over to Jeff if you don't have any more questions. Or
I will point out that Jeff brought that up in his presentation, that fiber optic broadband is most likely one of the expenditures that does qualify. Am I correct on that statement, Jeff?
That's correct.
Okay. Lon?
Mr. Chairman, this is Lon for those on the line, and Robert, mine, and this would be for you and Jeff. And I don't have any qualms about the qualifications of the company, but if we're going to enter into an agreement with someone or a company, and I hear, Jeff, that you're throughout the country, and from Robert's notes, it looks like a neighboring county, Seward County, has engaged parametrics with regard to their needing their assistance. But my question, Jeff, is with regard to your knowledge and your company's knowledge with regard to the Midwest, and whether or not you are in conversation with other Kansas counties, just to help our residents and our taxpayers understand who we're doing business with.
Yeah, so we have experience within the Midwest. I can provide you our follow-up chart with who all the applicants we've dealt with on the FEMA public assistance side. As it relates to, Seward County is a client. Ideally, Finney County would become a client. And then, to be honest with you, we probably wouldn't take any more than one more client because we want to make sure that we can give you the service that you would expect and that I'd expect for us to deliver to you, especially given the time frame to get the Spark funding and everything. We're not going to try and keep marketing and shoving more clients in. We're going to make sure that we take care of those that we have. And that's a really important piece for us. In this business, your reputation is everything. And it's really important to us that when we give you our word that we deliver on it.
That's fair enough. Thank you.
Jeff, did you not already work with the 500,000 citizen plus counties, Seward and Wyandotte?
I had a really tough time hearing you there. Can you say that again?
Dr. Clifford, had you not already contracted with the large counties in Kansas? So you have experience in Kansas already?
We haven't contracted with any of the large counties in Kansas. our current signed up right now, our only client is Seward in Kansas. Like I said before, we do have some past experience supporting some applicants through the FEMA Public Assistance Program within Kansas a few years ago through our federal contract.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one quick question for probably Robert more than Jeff. You went out for a request for proposals, and that.
No, sir, we did not go out on a request for qualifications.
My question is a basic one. Where are we in terms of employing the services being offered today with the requirement for certain bid specifications and so on? Are we good to go?
You have the opportunity to enter into an agreement for professional services without necessarily going out for qualifications.
Okay, thank you.
Gentlemen, time is of the essence on these reports, and it's in my opinion that paramedics can take care of the needed legal paperwork. Commissioner Jones asked about the FEMA reports, and this is the key. I think the reporting, the application of this is pretty technical, and I believe this company can handle it. And I don't think we need to put that upon our administrator to try to do this himself. So where do you guys feel? Do we want to go outside the county? And if so, how do we feel about this company?
Well, Dr. Clifford, I went to a presentation in Seward County at Rotary about their initiative with iParametrics, and I was very impressed with how far down the road they already were. So I've had a little glimpse of how this company reacts and how they interact with county government. So I was really pleased to see this pop up on our agenda from Robert. I would be fully supportive of this agreement.
We have quite a lengthy contract in our packet to overview. I hope you guys looked at it.
And if, Mr. Chairman, if that was Dr. Clifford's motion, I would second that motion to enter into contract.
I might request this. County Council has not thoroughly read this. I would like to ask you guys to allow our administrator to sign this contract after approval by council.
That would be a part of our motion.
Is that fair enough? Comments?
Well, a question. Could we ask for perhaps a comment from our emergency manager? This kind of getting into his territory too. Have you had a chance to look at this, Steve?
I think you've probably seen a few of these forms, Steve.
Yeah, I've worked through Robert's leadership. We put together a working group, a decision review board, basically to look at some of the opportunities we have within the county. And we reached out for Robert's direct to this company. A lot of positive feedback. We're very optimistic that they can meet our objectives. And we feel that we have an opportunity to really expand the scope of our operations, especially our emergency management.
That's all we needed to hear. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
Was yours an official motion, Doctor?
Yes, I would move to allow the administrator, after appropriate legal review, to sign the agreement with iParametrics.
And that's what I seconded.
All right, appreciate it, gentlemen. Further discussion on the motion?
So the expense of hiring these folks will come out of the CARES or FEMA auto money.
Correct.
Correct. There is an administration
It's
fee
authorized up to 5%.
that we can use to offset this. Correct.
Check.
Further discussion, questions, clarifications? If not, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Welcome aboard, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate your trust in us, and we'll do our best for you.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. We'll be in touch with you later on today. Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Right, Robert, did you want to expand a little bit? Well, Belinda's here. She brought up the fiber optic project.
You are muted.
What was that?
Once again, the fiber optic project, I'm probably going to let Doug expand on a little bit here. In essence, is the plan, if you will, that was put in motion, what, approximately 3 years ago? And would you want to expand, in essence, in general, what that potentially could look like?
Do you want the map up there?
Sure. Let's give them an idea of what that potentially could be. And
This is I might comment, I learned about this in detail the other day. This is a very forward-thinking project that is fantastic for the entire county. And I commend everybody who's put some thought into this. I'll turn it over to you, Doug.
This is the fiber layout that we've kind of engineered over the last couple of years. And it's broken out into phases of installation, but in the timeliness, we'd look to do this all, it be installed from now until December pending approval. But the red is kind of the route from administration to the health department. The blue would be up north, and it would go by several things, one of them being the new EMS fire station. And then we use Jenny Bartner's easement as the south drawback, and it would take all of Garden City and turn it into a easy access fiber loop. It's got the ability to be expanded as buildings are put out there. So this is not just a single fiber that's ran across Garden City that's for one single business or anything like that. It would have expandability built into it. And it also makes a circle around Garden City like what a water distribution network would do, so that it can be tapped into as say we at some point decide we need a new health department. We don't have to undo a giant chunk of engineering. We just build the health department and plug it into the outlet that's closest to it. This is designed with expandability and ease of deployment in mind, and that's why it's such a big undertaking, but it's designed for as much future-proofing as you can ever get in technology.
Does that include schools, college?
It actually does. These yellow blobs were, there's some labeling and stuff on them that didn't show up in this layout, but these yellow blobs represent schools, and we're within spitting distance of pretty much all the schools. There's a couple of them that have a little bit of distance, but we're looking into how we can overcome that in the short term also. We're thinking there may be some additions needed, but even adding additional fiber would be a lot lower cost when you've got this huge thing to make your access, instead of having to get from, A to B in a star. We're looking at shortest point of reference from pretty much anywhere on this route. So it makes those accommodations drastically lower cost moving forward, even if you do have to get to something way out in the middle of nowhere. There is no way out in the middle of nowhere after this ring is put in place.
Keep in mind, Commissioner, that all of these projects such as this go to the state of Kansas for review and approval. This would be one of them that I would suggest that the county embrace and try and push forward, as it has many benefits within the scope of that SPARK grant program that it would touch, not just for the public health aspect of it, for connectivity, but also for your economic development initiatives here in the county, as well as educational outreach for various schools.
And we continually ran into communication as the number one holdup. We had to deploy just Verizon hotspots to get communication into some of the spots where we were having issues during the initial pandemic launch, if you will. This does away with all of that. We've also, in map 2, and actually, Sarah, I think they're in there if you scroll down. Maybe, Yeah, so this is to highlight the deployment of the fairgrounds, where right now we've only got a few of the buildings connected, and they've kind of got strings of old networking equipment that we had left over from other runs to get some of the buildings connected. So we would redo that entire facility and turn it into one correctly designed, correctly engineered layout for connectivity. Go down to the next page. Is there more on that one? I'm not sure. No. So inside of this overall project, we also have the ability, and they're considered separate legs, so pending approval, of course, but we've included design work to get all the way from the airport out to the Holcomb EOC station that's part of Finney County also. And we could, utilizing this one plan, we could assist with the city of Holcomb or Holcomb School District as well. We've accommodated growth for economic development. We've accommodated anything we could get to that we thought would be beneficial to not Finney County, but Finney County. And we tried to make that one plan based on where we saw communication needs, where we saw things that were challenging from EOC standpoint, where we see challenges in education. We tried to cover that entire swing.
All right, open it up to questions. Again, I'll offer the opportunity to the employees of the city as well. Commissioners?
We have no cost estimates on this, so we have.
Yes, he does.
Scary?
It's a scary number, big number. But we ambitious moving from the airport all the way to Holcomb. That adds to it, but it's also kind of a key for growth, I would have.
It is a big number to get this deployed, but there would also be some decrease of things that we spend money on now. Like I said, some of those Verizon hotspots could go away. Some payments to the ISP that we make now to get services where it's not possible internally, some of those payments would decrease substantially over time. So it is a big number up front, but it does a lot for the community, and it does a lot for Finney County long term also.
Do you have to expend this funds by end of the year? Is that
Yes.
That's correct. Slow.
And that's where our consultant can help get this paperwork done fast enough to get it approved. It has to be approved by the state.
But I understood you could encumber the funds. They didn't necessarily have to.
That's not been confirmed yet.
No.
It's not been confirmed.
You're gonna find a contractor then too.
I have found a contractor, and they've assured me via writing that they're capable of completing this project.
Wow.
But they want to know ASAP too,
They would
correct?
like to know as soon as possible. I told them that the last possible day we would know would be August 31st. He's okay with that. He'd like to know sooner if possible.
September, October.
Ambitious.
Yeah. Well, I know the Holcomb schools have fiber to them now.
To them individually, yes. Not part of a infrastructure.
No, not of the city. That I know of. I know the schools do.
And the city building in Holcomb has very little connectivity to it whatsoever. They were told by their ISP that there's no possible way for the city building in Holcomb to ever have VoIP phones or anything. So we're trying to assist them via our EOC to get some services that they wouldn't have access to.
Our assessment, gentlemen, is after we pay out the actual required expenses. Leftover pool will have a variety of people. The city's going to have some requests that are hot on their table. I'm sure the chief, Russell Child, school district, college.
It's not going to be never ending.
We're going to have quite a pool of, we would like this. And so we're going to get to decide amongst, it's going to be quite a negotiation, whether this is a project that benefits the community enough that the college, the school, the city would say, okay, we'll give up a little bit of this because this is very good for our community.
This addresses a lot of them in ways that they may not even know they need yet. Like I said, we've accounted for the school district. We've got accommodations in here for the college to connect. We've got accommodations in here for the city to give to a lot of their services. We tried to account for as many of those agencies as we could. So hopefully, when they see what this does for them, they won't have as much that they request.
And those requests need to come into us by the 31st, correct?
Yes, and your consultant now will assist in that and also help develop a matrix in terms of decision-making to assist in distribution of those funds.
And because of the FEMA proposition that he put in front of us, those numbers could be a little higher than we originally thought that we have available.
Correct. There's a possibility that based upon what expenditures we may be able to recover through FEMA, that there may be additional in there as well.
Dave?
This is almost reinventing a wheel in a way, because years ago we had a backbone fiber optic system that involved the city of Garden City, the county of Finney, the school district 457, the community college, but also the hospital. And I mentioned every one of those except the hospital. So we've been there, did that at one time. It was primitive by today's standards.
Some of that loop is actually, some of that original fiber is actually still in use today. And it's been band-aided and patched several times to even be usable. But yeah, this would make that environment obsolete entirely.
I think this is a fair question, Doug. Have you reached out to the city's IT? Are they on, you're saying they agree with your?
The city's IT department helped design the initial loop when we looked at building this initially.
Okay.
And yes, originally we talked to all of those entities that I mentioned about how we could get close to everybody and accommodate them with the shortest paths. I think we've accomplished that.
I think once we receive confirmation that this is a potentially go project, then we can begin that outreach to make sure that we refine it for needs, making sure that we can meet that 1231 date as well, of having it in the ground and paid for.
Do we as a commission need to convene to discuss this before it goes out, or where do you see that?
Throughout this process, the commission will need to convene probably pretty frequently as we move forward with the consultant as we develop this plan. And then following that, then it's just the execution of that plan. We'll need to. So
we might have some spur of the moment meetings. I'll try to, if we have to, the mornings work for you, sir, or do you?
Yeah.
Okay. Lon, you both are out of county politicking, so.
Yeah, the mornings are best.
The mornings are early mornings.
Maybe conflict certain times.
Two more weeks.
One of the things that Mr. Stevens mentioned was that they would have that final spending plan and that the board would need to vote on that on August 13th. So I think that definitely we can plan.
Which is a Thursday.
That is a
Yeah, but my question is input on give and take on, do we allow a lot for Russell Child, for example, versus
right.
city's request, college, USD 457-367.
We will be meeting on the 10th to canvass provisional ballots. So that date you would already be here that day anyway. So that's another opportunity that would be a few days before when you would need to make that final.
Okay. Well, I think we'll have a couple meetings in between then and there. But
So we have a meeting the 3rd, the 17th, the 10th, and the 13th. Is that what you're?
No, she's saying eliminate the 10th and do it on the 13th and do it on the 10th.
No, you're going to be here on the 10th anyway,
Yeah.
but you're going to have to do it on the 13th to finalize that plan. I don't know that they'll have
Plan
a final
won't be
before
ready
that.
by the 10th.
You don't think?
In his time. Yes, in his calendar schedule, he had mentioned that the 13th
about the
would be the
10th?
final review of the, would be the final review of that.
Okay. Further discussion on this topic. I think Doug and your staff and all those input are going to be congratulated, very ambitious. I think it's a tremendous idea that'll really benefit the county long term.
Just,
You need to vote. We don't. I'll need to vote on this. This is strictly part of discussion of potential uses of the SPARS money.
Yeah, no action required. Once again, we'll just incorporate this into that plan for final consideration by the state if that's fine with this board. And we'll look at other projects as well as we move forward.
Have you received any requests already from outside, from like, for example, college?
No formal ones yet, but we'll be sending out that outreach here, especially now that that we'll move forward with this contractor to get that going.
Okay. All right, let's end that discussion then and continue on with our regular board meeting. I believe the only thing that's left is your report, Robert, so.
Well, you've got the lion's share of it.
You got it, right there.
The other thing that we do need to begin spending some time on is the budget as we start to get things tightened up a little bit more on the budget forms and so forth. So we'll need to be meeting as well on that.
Do you, your system, do you see a budget workshop as the commission is usually accustomed to?
Correct, and my question to you is that you did see the lion's share, if you will, dollar-wise of the departments here last Monday to try and accommodate your needs and your comfort level. Do you want to see some of the smaller ones as well, or are we just you know,
you're talking the treasurer, clerk, or county clerk.
This is on the general fund. Most of those are, you heard from the courts, this is the largest one in that general fund.
Well, if we had the date of the budget workshop so we could advise some, in my case, some outside library and senior center folks, if they're sitting in the audience that day, then if we have a question, we can ask and get it all resolved right quick. So
we'll make that happen as well.
But we don't have a date yet for that budget workshop. So.
Not yet. I think we did have a tentative one, but I don't recall that right off the bat. I'm looking at Dora because I know we talked about it a few weeks back, but I just don't recall it. So, but we'll get that budget scheduled then now. I think it's the same one, in fact, that the auditors had planned, if I remember correctly. So we were going to.
As soon as you learn that date, could you send us an email, Tori?
This will all be in August, correct?
Say it again, please.
This will all be in August?
That's correct.
Okay. Because I'm gonna miss the first meeting in September, so I just.
You have a publication deadline of like the 25th of August, do you not, for our budget?
Actually, the publication date, deadline would be the 10th of August. You have to vote on the budget on or before the 25th, as that is the date that needs to be to your county clerk. And if she doesn't write it,
That's what I remember. Yeah.
All right. Done. Anything else to come from the commission?
Dory, were you going to give some election things?
Well, I did share earlier about the canvas and whether or not you had to.
Yeah, I didn't know if you had anything else.
You know, only that we, in the first 2 days of early voting, we had about 50 voters each day. We've had 103 total. We sent out, so far, 330 mail ballots have been sent out. So we only had, like I said, in 2018 for the primary, we only had 329 early voters, period. So the fact that we've already seen 100 in 2 days is pretty impressive. So, and we are doing that every day, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. The day before the election, we would stop voting at noon. We are still doing a couple of evening voting opportunities, which would be July 22nd and July 28th. We'll be here until 7 p.m. And on August 1st, we will be here on Saturday, August 1st, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So please spread the word. We want to give people a lot of opportunity to vote, so we hope we've accomplished that.
You have your election workers all lined up?
Hope so.
Hope so. All right, anything else to come in before the commission? Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.